Serious, white people who grew up in low-income families or didn't experience the good life, what does white privilege mean to you and how do you feel about the term? I honestly think it is even more noticeable. I was orphaned at 12. Had no stability and was always on the edge of being sent to the household of a different relative. I was a good kid. When you are given no rules but know if bring any trouble to attention you are moving, you are amazingly good. I did well in school and had a scholarship, but the lack of a familial support system throughout made everything a tightrope. Adults who knew my situation were sympathetic and helpful, and I was always surrounded with the expectation that a smart kid like me would make something of myself. I cannot express how fragile the tightrope was and the underlying fear I had of the consequences of breaking that image. And with all that, I had massive struggles and a few significant failures. Now take that and begin the tightrope with the adults in schools and teen jobs having any other assumptions. If they didn't assume I would, despite no parents nor money, find a way to college. If that wasn't instilled in me, let me say that I never once through my whole youth thought not going to college was even a possibility. Smart kids went to college. That is how it worked. Do you really think I would have had that same unshakable perspective if I were not white? I certainly don't, and there were very, very few things in my youth that were that certain. Without that certainty, I can't even imagine where I would be. The people that struggle with white privilege generally have a lot of other privileges too. I expect they think, well, the difference is because the black kid is poor/bad neighborhood/fatherless, not just because their skin is dark. I can tell you, when white privilege is just about the only privilege you have, you don't mistake the value of it. You ride those positive assumptions about white kids for all they are worth and double down to prove them right. The other thing you really notice is that you can pass in a way non-white people from a similar background cannot. If I don't want to go into all the hard luck of my life, then or now, everyone just assumes I have a normal middle-class background. Small slips are overlooked, not knowing what is appropriate to order at a business dinner, because people don't easily challenge their assumptions. I don't need a seminar to know that not the same for non-white people. Basically, I have the privilege of not having to explain how I overcame challenges to get where I am. My privilege is that people assume I did not have the challenges. And I don't know if you can understand how beneficial it is to pass like this. Having to explain it is exhausting no matter what your race. And I am sure the subtle probes are very frustrating for non-whites who just had a middle-class upbringing. To all the people that say there are poor white individuals who have massive struggles, how can that be a privilege over X? Yes, there are massive struggles that can be experienced by any human. But going through them with dark skin is not the same experience as going through them with white skin. I am in my 40s, so all this white privilege talk wasn't anything I heard in my 20s, but I remember a time shortly after college when things just fell apart for me. I was just starting to put things back together, and I don't know why this crossed my mind, but I remember thinking, thank God at least I am white, or this would be even harder. I really don't know what prompted that thought, but I remember how obvious that was to me then. White privilege is, among other things, the benefit of the doubt. And there were times that this was difference between staying on the tightrope or falling off. The expectation that I would make it to the other side, not just from the teachers and relatives, but every story I read of orphans making good, who all happened to be white, that all pushed me past moments when a more realistic expectation would have led me off the tightrope and onto a more realistic balance beam with a more realistic destination. White privilege is not just external, although it is definitely external, it is also part of our self-image and limits or lack thereof we place on our imagined future. Smart kids go to college. That was my expectation, that rule, and my unquestioning perception of that being a rule and not an aspiration shaped my life as strongly as my mother's death did. And I do not think I am wrong to imagine that non-white kids are not surrounded by such a universal expectation. Even one teacher not behaving as if college were a foregone conclusion for me would have made me start questioning and investigating how unrealistic college would be with no money, and what the other options there were. These are things I never considered, not even when I was floundering in college. I'm so pleased to see this at the top of the comments. I was nervous when opening the comments so I could make sure this was said. I also grew up very poor. Luckily with my parents who are good people. My partner also grew up poor with his amazing mom who brought them from a war-torn country in Africa to the Bronx as refugees before finally getting refugee status here in Canada. If you look at us both based only on economic backgrounds, how much money we had and that we both know what it's like to go without hydro or heat or food, you could compare our situations, but that is where it ends. I've never been arrested for being poor. He has. We've both done illegal things to survive, yet how come I have never spent a day in jail and have a squeaky clean record, yet he does not? I've never been pulled over for driving over a year with expired tags because I couldn't afford the renewal, yet he gets pulled over all the time for nothing, especially now that we have a nice car. I've never been harassed or beat by police for just existing in my body, he has. When I went to university, it wasn't assumed that my athletic ability got me there. When I dropped out of university to work full-time to support my parents, it was not assumed that I dropped out because I wasn't smart enough. I was not considered a dropout. He was. Today, as a successful, educated woman, when I present myself to people who do not know my background, no one assumes anything about how I got here. No one asks me how I could possibly do it. They assume I earned it and that I had what they consider a normal upbringing. He does not get that assumption. There's so much more. At the end of the day, we both pulled ourselves out of poverty and suffering, but yet the assumptions made about us are not the same. Not at all. Thank you for this. Your life is a fascinating read, even more so that you come up with an articulate thought on this issue from an empathetic standpoint. People who struggle usually are more concerned about their survival, so I don't get surprised when they have difficulty appreciating the smallest of helps in their lives and write it off as all effort. For you to identify something even a super privileged person like me couldn't see is eye-opening. There was an article I read in the past about wealth confidence, where it talked about how unrealistic shows about celebrities trying to live poorer. This particular show had a celebrity go ask around grocery shops and stores to obtain free stuff she could use, and she got them easily. She knew she was only acting poor, so it didn't hurt her pride to go around asking for freebies. Real poor people will try to hide their poverty and won't do that, because it's their last essence of pride to not get help from others. This really resonated with me. I would have never been able to fight my way out of poverty if I wasn't white. I think I milked my white privilege for all it was worth.